My name is Jake Woolfenden. I am the owner of Summit Safety Group, as Randall said. If you guys aren't familiar with what we do, we are a safety consulting business. Really short, easy way to put it is we come in and assist businesses with their safety department. Sometimes we come in and kind of help take over that if they're small enough. If they're big enough, then we just work with their safety managers from a true consultant standpoint and try to direct them in the right way, okay? A little bit of backstory on me. Like I told you just a few minutes ago, my dad owned a construction company for about 30, 40 years out in the Washington, D.C. market where I'm from. And I would go back and work with him in the summers and Christmas break and stuff like that. And he owned a rebar company. So his company would go in and install the rebar into big commercial projects, high-rises, bridges, all that kind of stuff. So I got a call when I was in college from my mom, and she called and said, hey, your dad's been in a very serious accident. And so, I mean, right off the bat, it's just, you think the worst. I mean, it's still, I can still kind of feel the emotion of that. And so if you see here up in this picture, what you have is a rebar column that these guys are not wearing hard hat or any PPE or anything like that, which is wrong, but they're actually doing something right, and they've actually braced off the rebar column. What you can also see, let's see if this thing has a pointer. There we go. You see the crane in the back. Typically what happens is you have a tower crane or some sort of big crane that comes down and actually latches to the top of that column. And so it sits on these little rebar dowels. They're maybe 4 or 6 inches high. And they're just little rebar dowels. They're not meant to hold that. It's what they connect to. So you're supposed to brace it off or keep it connected to the crane. Well, my dad had hired this new guy, and he had several on his crew, but this new guy just happened to be with him on that column. And so, just like this, the new guy, without even realizing it before it was braced, he unhooked the latch to the crane. And so my dad was on the other side. Well, he jumped off. So basically, like here, this guy jumps off. Well, when he did that, it pushed all the momentum towards my dad. And so what happened was that column fell on top of him. Literally crushing him. So it didn't kill him, but when I say it literally crushed him, it did literally crush him. I mean, you talk about his pelvis was crushed. He fell on the side, and so his pelvis was crushed, his back was broke. And so, that's part of the reason I got into this was I've got a random background. I've got a master's degree in clinical counseling. So if you guys need some therapy after this, maybe we can talk. If OSHA is just bringing you down and you're getting depressed, we can probably talk about that. No, I take this stuff pretty personally. And so, we also deal a lot with clients who have had fatalities. They've had people that have lost limbs and things like that. And so we're directly involved with those clients. And in fact, even in some cases, I mean, I've been able to use my degree. I've gone and actually worked with some of the employees that were affected by that, people who have given CPR first aid and the guy didn't make it. Just the stuff that they deal with after the fact. It's not just the employee who dies and then the family that deals with it. There's employees and teammates that deal with this stuff too. So, as a company, we're directly involved with all that. And so for us, our motto is to protect and promote the value of life through safety. That's what we want to do. That's what I'm constantly hitting with our consultants. Trying to they believe it, they buy into it. That's why they're on our team. But just getting, sometimes it gets mundane. It's easy to forget about. We get so wrapped up in the policy and the procedure of it that we just forget why we're doing this. And that truly is to try to protect and promote the value of life. Okay. Okay. So OSHA, we're going to talk about some awesome updates. I appreciate that Connell has put this on, and they do a great job. And this is a huge deal. I mean, they really pour a lot into this. And so it's pretty cool to be a part of. So OSHA, just a brief history of OSHA. So 1970s, the OSHA Act came to be. And since that time, we have seen the workforce double. Okay, you guys following with me? The workforce has doubled since the 1970s. They have seen a decline of 60% in fatalities and injuries. 60%. So the workforce has doubled. OSHA comes in. 70s, they start to clean things up. There's a lot of bad players out there that are just taking advantage of employees. They're just profit first. And so 60% of fatalities have gone down since the 1970s. That's pretty awesome. Now, there are a lot of other factors, in my opinion. I think a natural, as a business owner, one of the things you're trying to do is manage costs. So workers' comp claims, things like that, they go hand in hand. It's not just OSHA, it's not just their enforcement, but there's been a lot of good that has come out of OSHA. I say that because I want to kind of lay the foundation, because I feel like a lot of what we're going to talk about can get very negative, okay? There's a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of things that I want you guys to take away from this. So anyway, that's kind of the good. What we're going to talk about today, top 5 changes to watch this year, and some of this is happening, has already happened, or it's happening. You guys have the slides out in front of you. I would encourage you not to read too far ahead. Just try to stay focused and try to stick with me, okay? First off, heavy-handed fines just got heavier. OSHA fines to rise this August. So August of 2016, we'll talk about that. What I call the perfect storm. This is Kansas City's regional emphasis program, and Connell actually offers some videos for you guys. I don't know if you knew that, but there's some videos that they put out on YouTube. This is something that they brought us in. They brought me in several months ago in the first part of this year, back in the spring, to actually talk about this regional emphasis program, because it is huge. And so we'll talk about that and what that means for you. The final rule on Silica, that has just been passed this last spring, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, guys, if it doesn't feel like it applies to you, just still hang with me, because I promise you that there's some nuggets of truth that you'll be able to pull out of this, and that there will be some applications that you can take back. How many of you guys are directly involved or even indirectly involved in your safety programs? I mean, probably pretty much everybody in here. And the right answer would be yes, Jake. Safety is my responsibility, so I'm absolutely involved, right? That's the Sunday school answer. All right, your 300 logs are going public. We'll talk about what that means with the new record-keeping rule. This is where it starts to get a little bit political, okay? Mandatory post-accident drug screening ruled out, meaning anybody who has a mandatory drug screening policy or a blanket drug screening policy for anybody that gets injured, you're not allowed to have that anymore, basically. Okay, we'll talk about that. Now, there are things that are changing as we speak. I got an email 2 days ago that this was supposed to go in effect August 10th. Well, they've already changed that, so now it's November 1st. So as we go through, I'll show you where we've got that. And you guys have pens and stuff in front of you, and you can make those changes. Okay, let's talk about this. Guys, we're talking about some serious dollars. Heavy-handed fines just got heavier because they already felt like they were heavy-handed, already felt like they did a pretty good job of going in and finding customers or clients who are at this size and at this profitability or whatever, and they did a pretty good job already, in my opinion, of coming in and finding them at the level or rate that they should. Well, they didn't think so. They're raising it by 78%. 78%. So we'll talk about a little bit more in detail what that means. That is in effect this August. So if you get a citation, your max for a serious goes from $7,000 to a potential $12,500 for one citation. So that could be a serious violation. Is a extension cord missing a grounding pin. That's a serious violation. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to fine you that. It just means that they could fine you that. Okay? All right. So basically, they have felt like their current model, their current fine structure, no longer carries the weight that it once did. And what you guys need to understand is that OSHA fines and they send out citations because that's their way of giving you a smack on the wrist. That's their way of saying you have not done everything that we've asked you to do. So it's kind of this old school approach of, here, we're going to fine you and try to, get you a little bit scared before we come in, and we want you to feel the pressure and feel the weight after a citation is issued. And so that's their way of disciplining businesses, in essence, is really what it is. So having kept the same fine structure since 1990, the U.S. Secretary of Labor, who's the current Secretary of Labor, says, adjusting our penalties to keep pace with the cost of living can lead to significant benefits, in his opinion, for workers, which there's some truth to that, and can level the playing field for responsible employers who should not have to compete with those who don't follow the law. Okay. Statement sounds pretty good. Would you guys agree with that? Everybody wants, I hope that everybody here wants their employees to go home safe. I hope that you feel like you're a good company that wants to keep a good safety program. But there's so much gray in this. We work with so many businesses that do a great job that still walk away with citations after an inspector comes through because they supposedly did not, because they broke the law, right? But you're talking about 1,000 items. You know, you got construction manual, which is this thick of just line after line after line after line of possible citations. General industry, same way. Book is just as thick. I mean, so it can be a little bit difficult to swallow that. Okay, so we have this massive 78% spike that takes effect August 1st of this year. And it may not account for the cost of living increase that since they originally established that current fine structure back in 1990. But what it doesn't seem to take into consideration is that the cost of doing business has just gone up. I mean, would you guys agree with that? So they're looking at it strictly from, oh, we haven't raised this since 1990. So we're way past due. We've given you guys a break. Since 1990, we haven't fined you. We haven't gone up in citations. So we've done you. We've been helping you out this whole time. I don't agree with that. So I have a question for you. Give me some examples in your industry where the cost of doing business has gone up. What are some obvious ones right off the bat? Insurance rates, yes. Labor has gone up. What's one of the big things that's out there right now? Just even the minimum wage. That's being argued right now. What else? What's that? Fuel has gone up. Yeah, I mean, it's come back down, but it probably will go back up. What else? I mean, health insurance. I mean, you talk about insurance, but just all the, I mean, I know, we, at our company, I mean, we pay 100% of all their health insurance for our consultants, and so every time I see a 15% raise, I'm like, how do you swallow that? It's tough. And we don't even have that many employees. I mean, several of you guys in here have hundreds of employees. Anything else? What's that? Compliance? Yeah. So you guys get the point. I mean, and you guys deal with this day in and day out. You know that the cost of doing business has just gone up. So they're coming at it from a very, in my opinion, very skewed perspective. They don't seem to be considering any of that. And it gets pretty frustrating. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the second one. Second item here, I call this the perfect storm, and I'm going to try to lay it out as to why I call it that, because to me, it appears to be an OSHA that we've never dealt with. The amount of, we know that government is supposed to kind of monitor themselves. You guys agree with that? I mean, they're supposed to put in their own checks and balances to make sure that there's certain things, lines that they're not crossing. But what's interesting is how they start doing these little things to basically be able to go right through that. And they find these little openings and they find these little loopholes to be able to pass right over their own checks and balances. And so we'll go through some of that. But like I put here, there seems to be a perfect storm brewing as we assess ways in which they're expanding their scope during routine site inspections, as well as handing out these new penalties. So you have these really heavy-handed penalties, and then now you have an expansion in scope that makes it that much more easy for them to come in and fine employers. Okay, and like I said, it's an OSHA that I believe that we've never seen before. So what does that mean? First off, they have a bigger, broader scope, and there's more under the microscope. Let's just take this specific Kansas City regional emphasis program. Okay, most of you guys will fall under that. It's not just Kansas City, but most of you guys do fall under their jurisdiction because they cover that office covers a large part of the Midwest. So let's just take this, bloodborne pathogens. How many of you guys have your employees trained in CPR first aid? Anybody? Okay, so if you have, what's that? Yes, look at that. That's good feedback. Nice. She just yelled it out. I appreciate that. So if you have, it's not so much the CPR, but the first aid. If you guys have anybody trained in first aid, now there's a whole process that you have to go through to ensure that your written programs follow this bloodborne pathogens. So basically what they're going to do is go in and say, okay, who's tasked at your facility to clean up blood? Who's tasked to clean up, it's not trying to get gross, but reality, vomit. I mean, that's how bloodborne pathogens are also transmitted. So whoever is tasked to do that, you have to have a complete exposure, written exposure control plan, and then several other things that I'm not going to get into right now, but there's a whole list of items just on that one thing that you have to have. Now, I'm not discouraging you to get CPR first aid trained because I think it's critically important. I mean, in fact, we work with, we do a lot of that for clients. And it's really cool when we hear feedback. Just recently, probably 6 months ago, we had an employee that talked to one of our consultants and said, actually, you just gave me the class, the CPR class, and I was able to implement that at work 2 weeks after that. And the guy ended up living. So it's pretty incredible to hear some of those stories come back. So I don't discourage you from doing that. It's just that if you do, there's things that have to go along with that. Machine guarding, we've heard about this for years. But this is a part of this one emphasis program. This is that big looming cloud. This is that big umbrella that has all of these things inside of it. Machine guarding, it is what it is. You know, do you have a press? It needs to be guarded. Do you have a saw? It needs to be guarded. That's, you know, you guys can understand what that is. And that's an emphasis that has continued. There was an emphasis program created for that several years ago that's just been continued time after time. Technically, the one that we're under, the one that we're talking about right now, started May 1st and is supposed to end September 30th. It never ends September 30th. It will continue to go on probably for a long time, especially since this is so expansive. Okay, ergonomics. It's not just for the office anymore. They're starting to come in and assess what are you doing at your facilities to assess. You know, if they walk in and they see a guy just sitting there like this, working overhead, they're going to say, what's your ergonomic program? Why is he continuing to do that? And that's not wrong. I think that, you know, as an employer, you should be looking for opportunities, even just from a workers' comp standpoint, to try to lower those costs, to look at ways you can end or eliminate, not end, I think that's unrealistic, but to eliminate as much as possible some of those repetitive motion injuries, right? So, but what they're going to do is they're going to come in and say, what are you doing specifically for ergonomics? I want to see your whole program. And there's a huge list of items that they want to see. PPE hazard analysis. Okay, what are you providing them to be able to do this job and do it properly? All sorts of different stuff that I don't want to go into right here. It's just, I mean, there's a lot to cover. Lockout, tagout. This has also been around for a long time. For the last probably 5-6 years, this has been a huge emphasis. This is also tossed under that umbrella for this regional emphasis program. So, and let me go back so that you guys even understand what exactly a regional emphasis program is. Basically, they look at the data from the region and they say, here are the items that we have that we see most often. Here are the injuries, here are the rates. When we see people's 300 logs that you guys turn in, and we'll go and talk about that, they basically look at all that data and they say, this is what we're going to go after. Okay, this is, and I mean, it makes sense, right? You're going to go after the highest number of routine injuries or whatever that they're seeing on a routine basis. That's the stuff that would make sense to go after. Would you guys agree with that? I mean, it's common sense. But it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to go after this one thing or these two things. Again, now they've thrown all of these things under this big umbrella, and they're saying this is everything that we're coming out to inspect. Okay, process safety management. How effective is your safety program? There's about 5 or 6 key elements under the 16-element part of process safety management that they're coming out specifically to come out and audit. So you need to check that as well. Air sampling. So we have this arm of OSHA that comes out and does pretty routine stuff with construction, manufacturing. They're looking at the machine guarding. They're looking at the lockout, tagout. Then you have the industrial hygiene arm of OSHA, and they're different. They work together, but they're different. This industrial hygiene arm is coming out, and they're doing air samples. So they're looking for isocyanates and silica and lead, hexavalent chromium, respirable dust. I mean, all these different things, they could come out. Any one of those things, they could come out and say, hey, we're here to check if you have any stainless on site. We're going to check to see what your hexavalent chromium PELs are. PELs are personal exposure limits. What is an employee allowed to be around, and what is it deemed safe? And if it's over that, then you're going to get a citation. Okay? So there's air sampling, and I left out one. Noise sampling is another one, another big one that they're coming after. So you guys know that the 85 decibels, if it's over that, over an 8-hour period. So if you have a machine and it's just cranking all day, and you have an employee that's sitting there, if it's over 85 decibels over an 8-hour period, then that is when an hearing conservation program needs to set in. So that means you have to have a whole process, a whole procedure. You have to offer earplugs. You have to have signs that say where to enter, and if you enter this area, you got to have this. So there's a lot of different things that go along with that as well. Forklifts. This is a mandated inspection, and this is actually a national emphasis. So this is also coupled into that. What the federal government has said is we're having way too many forklift injuries, and so what we're going to do is we're going to come in and make sure that in every inspection, so if you have an inspector that steps on site, I don't care if he says that he's there just to see your written program, he is required to go out and check your forklifts as well. So how many of you guys have forklifts on site? Probably most of you. That is something that they will come out and it's mandated to check, okay? And there's all kinds of things on that. And just so you guys know, we try to put out as many resources for our clients as we can, and also just free resources for anybody that wants to take part in it. You can always go to our website. We put out newsletters that cover all of this stuff, and we want it to be a free resource for you guys. So if there's anything that you'd like to see specifically on each one of these, we've got several items out there that you'll be able to check out, okay? So what does this mean? You have all of these items. So if one of you said, yeah, we got forklifts, and another one said, well, we don't have forklifts, but we have somebody who's trained in first aid, you guys are pretty much all exposed. Now, when somebody comes in, what you need to understand is that when an OSHA inspector walks in, it's always been protocol to say, one, Mr. OSHA inspector, Mrs. OSHA inspector, what are you here to do? What are you here to see? And they'll tell you, well, I'm here for an emphasis program, and you fell on this list of companies that we need to come in and check. And so we're here for machine guarding. Okay, well, especially if you're working with somebody who's worked with OSHA before, you understand kind of the game and you understand what you need to do. You don't want to open up your entire facility. How many of you guys have a perfect facility 100% of the time? There's no OSHA violations. There's not any cords laying across the floor. I mean, there's not wet spots for slips, trips, and falls. I mean, it's impossible. It doesn't matter how good of a company you are, there's always going to be something that they can pull from that. You guys agree with that? Yes. And the frustrating thing for us as a company is that, we're trying to protect the client from getting as many citations as we can. And we don't work with we don't work with clients that just suck at their safety program. We just don't. I'm not going to try to protect somebody that just sucks at what they do and they don't value the lives of their employees, and that's just not who we want to work with. So we're not going to. But when it comes to, the clients that we do work with, when they come in, there's a process that we do, and that's the process. Hey, what are you here to do? Okay, great. So I'm going to lead you this way, not that way, because I know that there's something over there that maybe just happened that day. It's not that the employer is doing anything wrong. It's just that just popped up 30 minutes ago. Now they know it shouldn't be there. There's a pallet laying in front of the exit door. It's there, and it's going to be there for 10 minutes. Well, horrible timing. It seems like all of that stuff seems to just happen when the inspector's there. So typically what they do is they'll go in, but now, and you can lead them right to a specific place. You could lead them to a place where they're doing just, we're just machine guarding is the issue. But now, where is there not? Where are they? I mean, you can't, we're here for the emphasis program. It's like, here's the keys to the place. I mean, what are you supposed to do? If you let them in, now you do have the option to send them away with a warrant, okay? And we do that all the time. They're, contrary to popular belief, they're pretty used to that, and probably working with us. Like, oh, you're a summit, we're going to go away with a warrant, Okay, great. Because sometimes we like to get our clients prepared and ready to make sure that everything is really cleaned up, it's good to go. And sometimes when you get hit, if you've been busy, you just got a huge shipment of a bunch of stuff, the place looks chaotic. I mean, it's just the reality of business. And so we understand that, and sometimes we will send them away to come back. But if not, they basically have immediate access to your facility, and they will come back. When they come back with a warrant, they will have access to all of the things that they said that they were there for. So I kind of explained what it once looked like, and it's rare that under these circumstances they would not have full access to audit your entire facility. So it opens up so many of your operations, and that's where it gets a little bit scary and gets a little bit dangerous. Okay? Low-hanging fruit, an all-expenses paid trip. The reason I put that is because there is a reality. I was arguing a case, this is probably 2 years ago now, and we had a client that they're pretty minimal stuff. They ended up getting, it was minimal stuff, but they got a pretty substantial fine. It was $24,000. And I was able to argue that down to $250. So we went from $24,000 to $250. Do you know why we still had $250? I mean, we literally had the conversation. I understand that you were down here from Kansas City, and you guys need to, pay for your trip. And so, how about we just make this $250 instead of calling it zero? You know what I mean? So there's some of those politics that start coming in, and it gets a little frustrating for us. But we know how to play the game, and we know how to get them to a certain place. Doesn't mean it always works, but we try our best. So the low-hanging fruit, with the literal thousands of possible citations and with the expanded focus, they almost always walk away with a citation. And I tell you, it's really frustrating for us because what's the client paying us to do? Keep you from getting a citation, right? So if they still walk away with some of this low-hanging fruit, we're just like, guys, I get it. We don't want you to get it either. But there's so many items that we've been showing you what to do. And even if you've done those items, they can say, well, we're here to do this. And now we're going to look at this. So with that expanded focus, it just makes it that much more easy for them to walk away with this low-hanging fruit. And when we talk about low-hanging fruit, we're still talking about potentially $7,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20 fines that they could be pulling out of what we call low-hanging fruit. All right? So there are some things that you can curtail if you really take a proactive approach. What I would encourage you guys is if you've never been through an OSHA visit, call somebody who has. Call somebody who's been through that process because they can help you. There's several things you can do. First off, while the OSHA inspector is sitting in your office looking at your written programs, have somebody go out and assess your facility for all those low-hanging fruit items. Clean it up. Just go out, have somebody clean it up, make sure that things look good. Having somebody walk through with the inspector. I can't tell you how many times we've been through with people and we've argued them out of a citation right there on the floor because we know exactly what the client's doing, and we can say, look, this is not what you think it is, and this is actually the case. These guys they can't be skilled experts in every industry. They just can't. They can't be skilled experts in every piece of machinery that they run into. So there's several other things you can do. Also, OSHA informal hearings. I talked about being able to reduce. It's not just us. There's other companies that are out there that do this. But, our average success rate is we have about a 60% reduction rate when we are able to go up to Kansas City and argue these cases, or we just do it over the phone through an informal hearing. So I would recommend what they'll try to get you to do is, hey, here's a 30% reduction if you just pay this right now. Because they don't want you to argue with them. They'll actually put it in there. It says, this is an expedited payment agreement. Here's 30%. Pay it. You get a 30% reduction right off the bat. Probably knowing that if you argue it, they've done something to mess up or they haven't really looked at it right, and you can get it lowered even more than that. So that's an option to you as well. So what do we have? We have heavy-handed fines plus this perfect storm. Here's what that looks like. I talked about this, the serious citations. They're going to go from, you talk about the 78% increase, you've got $7,000 to $12,500 per item. So if you line up a bunch of extension cords, they're all missing grounding pins. They may not charge you the most, but they could be $3,000, $3,000, $3,000, $3,000. Here's a typical one. What do you see here? You guys know what those are? If you have forklifts? Right, forklift pedals, they don't have what? Yeah, no pads, no rubber pads. That is considered a serious citation. And so I threw that in there too because that's something that we see often, and it's something that when they come in and look at forklifts, it's one of the first things they see. So now we have a repeat. If you do this, you get a serious citation. They come back, and it still looks like that. Now you're opening yourself up to a repeat or a willful. And this is how much those have gone up. So the max penalty since 1990 has been $70,000 per item for both of those. Now they're going up to basically $125,000 as a max. I've dealt with a couple willful violations that were not willful violations, and so I went up to Kansas City and argued those cases on behalf of the client. I'm not an attorney. I don't know how I end up doing some of this stuff sometimes, but arguing with the Department of Labor attorney to actually get those fines negotiated. Not only the fines negotiated, but then get the willful removed, because that's a huge deal. Many of you guys know if you have something like that on your record, it's very difficult to do business with certain big customers that want to see that your safety record is looking pretty good. If you have a willful or a repeat on there, it just does not look good, and it's very difficult to get off. Okay, and if you have any questions, I know that I'm getting through this, fairly quickly, but I want you to go ahead and write those questions down, because we will have an opportunity at the end to, give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions or anything that you might have. Okay, this one I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because it starts getting into some stuff that is very technical, but I will talk about how some of the politics have played on the opposite side as well. Okay, so we talk about OSHA, we talk about government, we talk about their politics, but there's also been some politics from the private side where I think OSHA has actually been able to come in and help and do some things that they've finally starting to make changes to. So real quick, first off, without boring you, silica is just a mineral that's found in rock, concrete, brick, mortar, all that stuff. So if you've got a masonry crew and they're out there, cutting bricks, there's protocol that they have to follow. If you're a construction company and you're out there sawing concrete, you see all that dust that gets kicked up. All of that is going to contain silica, and it's a horrible. It's very dangerous. I mean, it can cause cancer. There's people that die from it. There's actually what's crazy is there's about 600 people that die from silica exposure every year. That's a lot of people. 600 people just in the U.S. workforce that die from silica. And now that's not even taking into account the ones who get silicosis, which is chronic lung disease, and also just people who get cancer. So then they may not die, but is that a good quality of life? No, absolutely not. So, right here, this is just basically going through, and there's stuff inside. I talked about more on the construction side, but there's things within general industry as well. For decades, silica has accounted for numerous fatalities and chronic illness. The original rule was established in 1971, and even in 1974. So NIOSH is kind of a group that works with OSHA. They're not OSHA, but they work with OSHA, and it's the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, and they do a lot of testing. There's a lot of things that they do on the side to basically show and prove to OSHA this is what we need to do. In 1974, they noticed that the personal exposure limits were already off. They were already wrong. So they had originally established those with silica in 1971. So, we're talking 40 years later, 40 plus years later, we're now at a place, knowing since 1974 that they were wrong, but we've kept them the same this entire time. So think about how many employees have been exposed and have died and who have had cancer and all this other stuff because I guarantee you there were politics on the side of the construction and the general industry trades where they had groups that were basically saying, if you do this, we're going to have to pay so much more money to fix this, this, and this, or have this kind of equipment or whatever. We don't want you to do that. So it's now only, it's as of now, they have started to make that change. And this is where, like I said, this is where I think politics has played a part. And this is where OSHA can actually come in and make some necessary changes. It sucks that it's taken this long to make that change, but it's good that they're finally making the change. Okay, what they anticipate is that they will be able to save about 600 lives and prevent more than 900 cases of silicosis every year. Every year, they feel like they can do that. So you say, so what is it, Jake? What is the personal exposure limit? What was that since 1974? Well, if you look at it, construction was 5 times higher than where it should have been because they just lowered it by 5 times the amount. I mean, that's pretty crazy. We're not talking about like, hey, we're going to lower it 0.5% or, we were pretty close, but, we'll go ahead and make the change now. They weren't even close. They're lowering it 5 times the amount. So we have several construction companies that we're working with that are kind of freaking out about it because, like, man, we didn't even know that. First off, we didn't realize it was that way. They just set this PEL, so we just went by it. It's not like they were doing anything wrong, but now, if you've got to change your operations to account for something 5 times more, that's pretty substantial. That's very substantial. And so, on the general industry side, they've actually changed it by half the previous limit. And I'm not really sure why all that is, but I mean, construction really does have the most most exposure to it. So anyway, I put this in here only for you guys as a reference. There's a lot more that I talk about on this, and this isn't really the setting for me to go into a bunch of detail on Silica. That's when I will make you fall asleep, and I'll probably start yawning up here too, even talking about it. But if you go back, you can find some more specific information on there if you guys take that home with you and come back and check it out online. But okay, the final rule took effect on June 23rd, so it is enacted. It is a rule, and you have until construction only had a year as of June 23rd. So that clock is already ticking. June 23rd of 2017 is when construction has to comply. They will start getting the industrial hygiene arm of OSHA will be out in full force. I promise you, they will be out doing baseline tests to see where you're at, and if you're over those PELs, then you will get a citation. General industry and maritime has a little bit longer. They actually have 2 years. And I think this has to do with, typically general industry has a lot, if they are working around Silica, there's some very large machinery that they're going to have to find a way to engineer out. It's a lot of money, so I think it gives them a little bit more time, gives them a little bit more time to set in their budget how they need to make some of these financial decisions. The only way you guys are going to know if you're over the PEL is if you have a baseline. So if you haven't had somebody come out and do air sampling to see if you're even over or at or under wherever on your personal exposure limit, you're not going to know where you're at. So if you haven't done that, there are several insurance companies that do that. We do that. There's other companies that do those tests, but you need to get that done to make sure that if they come in, and in fact, for any of the things that I talked about, lead, isocyanates, and if you think that OSHA just comes after the big employers, they don't. We work with a lot of small guys, and isocyanates was huge for body shops. I mean, some body shops have like 5 to 10 employees, and like workers, and they have more than 10 employees total, but that's including office staff and other. They got like 5 guys in the shop, and they're coming out and hitting. I mean, they probably hit a dozen or more of our clients alone for body shops just on isocyanate testing. So they're coming out and they're absolutely following up with this stuff. All right, we are moving right along. Thank you guys for hanging with me. We only have 2 sections left. Now this is where some things get a little bit more political, in my opinion, and where when I think about it from a business owner standpoint, my blood pressure starts to raise just a little bit because I understand what it puts a lot of our clients and customers in, the position that it puts them in. And so I want to make sure that you guys have a really full understanding of just everything that goes with this, all right? So anybody in here that doesn't know what a 300 log is? Probably don't want to raise your hand. Okay, good. I appreciate that. You guys raise your hand. I don't expect everybody to know what a 300 log is. 300 log basically is a sheet of paper, looks like that, and it just tracks all of your injuries for the year. It says here's the serious ones, here's the ones with days without work, or days away from work. Here's just a recordable incident. Maybe they just got a cut, they put some stitches on it, and they're able to go back to work the next day. There wasn't any modified duty, anything like that. But all that is basically housed on this one piece of paper. The way that it's been done is that you guys mail that in, and there's really been just a very old school way of that OSHA has been able to handle this. I'll talk about the positives and negatives in a second. I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself. But basically, that's what the 300 log is, okay? Effective January 1st, but so it is effective January 1st of 2017, but the first official rollout won't actually be until July of 2017. Now, basically employers who have more than 250 employees, that's who that's going to affect. There's some more stringent reporting policies that they have to follow. If you're from 20 to 249 employees, then that you're really only going to have to do just the 300A, and it's only going to be once a year. Okay? Now, what does this mean? So first off, the information will be public, meaning the general public, but more importantly, customers, potential customers, prospective employees, general contractors, etc., will have access to your injury data. What is that like? What does that make you feel? So not only are they going to have access to your injury data, but there's going to be no explanation as to what some of those injuries were. You don't have the opportunity. All they see is the data. There's not any way for you to come in and say, yeah, but look, this is what happened. And I actually have a couple examples. But first off, like I talked about, anybody in high hazard industries, does anybody have a saw at their facility? Just raise your hand quick. Okay, good. Anybody have a press at your facility? Okay, any one of those, pretty much all you guys are going to be in a high hazard industry if you fall under that category. High hazard's really not that high of a hazard. It's basically just meaning that you have tools at your place, you have an opportunity for somebody to get hurt, and so you're going to fall under that category. So 20 to 249 employees, you just have to submit your 300A. Now, again, if you have over 250 employees, 300, 300A, and 301 all have to be submitted. And if you don't know what those are, you should probably get up to speed on what that is. All right, so let's talk about the negative here. First off, we've got prospective customers and employees that will see your data, but not necessarily explanation as to how that data came up. I gave the example. We had a customer that they were actually pre-Sharps. If you guys don't know what Sharps program is, that's a kind of a joint venture between OSHA and the employer. It's a great program. It takes a lot of hard work that we have assisted. Our company has assisted out of the 32, 33 Sharps companies in Missouri. We probably helped about 26 of those. Now, when I say helped, we just helped. Okay, we kind of led, gave them path of direction. But it's a lot of work for the employers to do that. And I know we've got some Sharp sites here of people that we work with. But it's a great program. It's a joint venture program that allows that keeps OSHA out of your facility. So with this joint venture, that it's basically saying you can't just come in and audit us, which is a great thing. So a lot of what I'm talking about, you're safe from that if you're in the Sharps program. But again, it's very difficult to get in there. Anyway, this company was pre-Sharps, meaning they were almost ready to get into the Sharps program. So you have to have a certain injury rate and all that kind of stuff. Well, they had some downtime. And so they had some employees go out to the back fence of their property and start clearing out some brush and whatever, just trying to keep them busy. Well, they have 4 or 5 guys that got poison ivy. It's a recordable. They had to go to the doctor. They got medicine. They got treatment. So it becomes a recordable. Well, right off the bat, they were done. That one incident took them off the list. Now, are you guys starting to follow where I'm going here? So you start putting all this public information out there. Are they going to know that? Or are they going to see what the recordables are? They're going to see how many recordables you have and guys, are any of you familiar with ISNET? ISNET program. A lot of construction companies have to go through an ISNET process. Basically, it's an informational housing private group that has pretty geniusly been able to get a ton of money and create this monster of general contractors require all these subs to submit their safety data, all their written programs, all that kind of stuff, and they have to submit it to ISNET. And you're not even going to be allowed on the job unless you pass the ISNET program. Well, this is kind of start going that way because what we're seeing now is that as you start to see this go public, what do you think customers are going to do? They're going to look to see how good of a safety program you have. Are you going to be allowed onto our site? Do we want to do work with you? Do we want to do business with you? And whether or not you may not even have the opportunity to have the explanation. I think that's the part that gets a little bit frustrating. So I don't want to beat a dead horse on that, but I just see so many potential issues with that as we go down the road. One of the things we're going to talk about in the last section is what OSHA is trying to do to create and encourage reporting, because they feel like employees have been put in a position where they're not allowed to report certain injuries, or they don't report certain injuries out of fear that something's going to happen to them. There's going to be some sort of retaliation from the employer. So I feel like this right here, could really start to encourage those atmospheres where you've got an employer who's like, my gosh, all this stuff's going to be out there. You had poison ivy. Can we really need to report that? You start to see where there's some stuff that could creep in there where, yes, you do have to report it, but you could see where that temptation would be to not want to report those things, right? Okay, so now you have a system where you're relying on the government to put out data that directly reflects your company. How many of you guys trust the government that much? especially when you have an organization like OSHA that just cut their budget by over $15 million. So you now have a smaller budget, but they're doing more enforcement. They've well, if you want to really get into it, that could be a reason why they've raised the rates 78%, because they're also somewhat of a self-funded organization. What they bring in citations also helps their budget and helps them continue to run their operations. So you see there's definitely some politics going on there, which, it is what it is, and we just got to deal with it. But so now you're trusting the government to put this out there. They have said that we have the manpower. We have people that are going to come in and be able to make sure that everything we put out publicly is going to be something that's accurate, and we understand that it's representing your company, and so we're going to make sure that the people that we put on this, they're going to do it. Well, you guys don't trust that. I don't trust that. So now companies are going to have to be putting more resources into somebody to potentially track all that stuff. As they see all the stuff that's going up there, especially large employers, they're going to have to set somebody, and OSHA even admitted, they said, yes, this could potentially add several hours, was their quote, to somebody's job to make sure that everything that they're putting out there is actually accurate. What about the privacy of the injured worker? I mean, we could be getting into all kinds of stuff that now is public. So based on the size of the employer, OSHA is mandating every field to be submitted on these forms. So every field means every field. That means you're basically handing over the documents. Those things are being put publicly. Guess what they're going to do? Guess what OSHA's going to do? They're going to come back, and they use the word scrubbing. They're going to scrub out those the employee names to try to keep from privacy. So that means I can't even fathom how they're going to do this. They're going to go through and have to find. Now, if you have a field that's like, okay, employer name, sure, you can create some algorithms and some technology to be able to go in and just blank out those fields. But what about when you're talking about a description? You go through and you talk about it in some of these forms, you have to provide a description of what happened in the incident. So now you have somebody they're going to have to go through and say, like, is that Smith? Is that a name? I can't. I mean, so now they're going to go through and have to find those individually and scrub out what they see. Whew, I have no idea how that's going to work. This will be very interesting. So, yeah, like I said, OSHA's already had their budget cut this year. It'll be interesting to see how they can find the manpower to make these promises. There's another thing I want to leave real quick on the negative. There's a severe violator program. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a scary program. The reason for that is because if you end up on the severe violator program, there is no time period as to when you could be removed from that. So it's not a probationary period. It's like, hey, you guys, you've really had a lot of issues this year, or maybe unfortunately you had a fatality or whatever. We're going to put you on the severe violator list because we felt like you've done things that have created something that, an unsafe workplace or whatever, and so we're going to put you on this program. Well, okay, great. So that sucks. When are we going to get off of it? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I don't know. We're going to keep you on there as long as we want. So you're saying like 3 years from now I could be on that? Yeah. Is there any steps I can take to get off that? No. So like 7 years from now, I could still be on the severe violator program. Yeah. So I mean, there's no. It's just very ambiguous. It's very gray. And now that we have public data that's going out there, they could determine based on just what they see from a number standpoint and just from a data standpoint. Yeah, these people they probably should be on the severe violator program. It's getting a little. I mean, that's where I start getting a little bit. I get a little bit anxious on that. Okay, let's talk about positive. And I do think that there's some positive. I don't want to just come in here with all the doom and gloom. I think there are some positive things to this. First off, if you're a top performer, you have the opportunity to showcase that you are an exceptional safety program, that you have and you do things really well. This will make you stand out even that much more from the companies that other people never knew how bad their safety program is. Now everybody's going to know. Everybody's going to know because it's public, and they can go just check that out anytime they want. So if you do really well, you're going to get rewarded for that. And companies with horrendous safety programs will be brought to light. And when I say horrendous safety programs, I told you that there's companies that we just refuse to work with over time, and that's true. There are horrendous There are companies out there that should not be in business. They just shouldn't, because they could care less about their employees. It is only profit focused. It's only, owner focused, whatever. And it is what it is. But I wouldn't want to work there, and I don't want to work with people like that. So people like that, and if they don't have a good safety program, they have a lot of injuries. That stuff's going to be brought to light. That's good for their employees, because I think it gives them a little bit more empowerment to be able to come in and say, look, you guys all know that you're not a good company to work for, so I think we need to demand some maybe not demand, but I think we need to work towards a better safety program. It's good for competition if you have a solid safety record. So it's going to distinguish that much more between the ones who do well and those who don't. And then those that do fall under that bad safety category, hopefully it gives them a good nudge to be able to come in and start making some necessary changes to get to the place where there's a healthy peer pressure there to get their program straight. You're also going to have more accurate and timely data. What we currently work off of is so oftentimes like 2 to 5 years old. So by the time they get all that information together and gathered together, it's just it's not really that accurate, and it's definitely not timely. It also provides important protection to workers who report injuries. And again, guys, if you're a sharp site, you have that much more motivation to try to maintain that status. It's a big deal. And if you're not in it, I'd recommend that you start that process. Even if you don't get in the Sharps program, it's a great path to getting to a good safety program, to where you have to put yourself in a place, you have to assess certain things that'll hopefully get you where you should be. Okay, last thing, mandatory post-accident drug screening being ruled out. This is a new reporting rule that is being put out by OSHA. So, how many of you guys have policies and procedures that mandate drug and alcohol testing if a workplace incident occurs? Raise your hand high so I can see it. Okay, so lower it. Now, what if there's not even any reasonable suspicion? So regardless, you have a mandatory program. If there's an injury or of some sort, raise your hand again if that's still you. Okay, so you guys all fall under this category. Those are all things that that has to change. They're saying that by law, you can no longer do that. And we'll get into why. So right here, this is where you need to mark out. So take your pen, mark out August 10th if you would. I don't want you guys to leave with wrong information. Again, this email just came out 2 days ago, and they said that it's not August 10th anymore, it's November 1st. And that could change again. So I don't know, but stay tuned. So again, that will go into effect November 1st, and I think part of it is because they've had a lot of kickback, and I'm sure that there's been several big employers that have said, "You got to be kidding me." Yeah, I mean, we'll go into some of the stuff, and again, I mean, I may even get on my soapbox here in just a second and kind of talk about some of this stuff. But what they're looking at is they want to see that they're going to require employers to implement what they call a reasonable procedure. They don't feel like a mandated program or a blanket program is reasonable to the employer. So when do you think an employee might underreport an injury out of fear of being drug screened? Yeah, right, if they're doing drugs. So pretty much any incident, right? But I mean, let's talk, a little bit more realistically, and I'll give you some examples here, but what else do you think? Like what types of injuries? Where they may be like, you don't need to drug screen me, it's just this. Poison ivy, for example, right? Something like that. They'd be like, well, it's just poison ivy. Why am I getting drug tested for this? That's the kind of stuff that OSHA has been focusing on, or like a bee sting. I've got a bee sting, and now I've got to get some care. I've got to get a shot because I'm partially allergic to that or whatever. That's the kind of stuff. So right here, bee sting, back strains. These are things that they're calling out specifically. OSHA is saying that if it's something like this, then that's where we have an issue. They don't feel like you can have a mandatory policy, because what they feel it's doing is they feel like it's creating an environment where the employee is going to underreport. And so they're more concerned about the employee underreporting some simple injury like a bee sting or something like that than they are that an employee is using drugs. I can't wrap my mind around this idea. And they start throwing out words like privacy for the individual, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, what privacy do you need? I mean, I don't care if we find out that an employee, okay, you come to work for, XYZ company, and we're very clear that through the hiring process, we are a drug-free workplace. Okay, you understand that. You understand you're coming on board with us. We have a drug-free workplace. That means if you're using drugs, you're not welcome here. And if you want to go out with your buddy who's got a lawn crew somewhere that just hooks up on the way to and from. Well, I actually used to own a lawn business, but I never did hook up. But I knew some guys that did, and so that's why I use that example. Nothing against lawn crew guys. Hey, if you want to go do that, great. You can do that, but don't work here. And as an owner, as an employer, don't you feel like you have the right to be able to do that? I can't. We have this weird transition that's kind of happening in the country. You've got all these states that are starting to, legalize marijuana or very close to legalizing marijuana, which, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. It's just the way that it's the way that it's going. But does that mean that I still shouldn't have a right to hire somebody that, if they want to do that, okay. But if you want to work for us, you can't do this. And we're going to make that very clear. And that's a part of your hiring process, is that you understand under these expectations. When you come on, this is what you sign up for. So I have a really hard time when I see that somebody has a repetitive motion injury, a back strain, or whatever. I don't care how it is that you end up testing for it. You find out that they're using drugs. Who cares? You're using drugs. I mean, let's be honest. I don't think that most people that use drugs would say, yeah, I always use them 100% responsibly. I mean, guys, if you drink, come on, let's be realistic. How many times it's been like on a Sunday, it's like a holiday or something, and you got to go into Monday, the next day. You got to be mindful and responsible with what you're doing, but you're not always responsible. You're just not. And so if you already use drugs and you do things like that, you're probably not always going to be responsible. And we know from historical data that people who do that, and if they're at work, they cause accidents. They kill people. They kill themselves. They cause problems. And so I just don't get this. And so I have a really hard time with it. But what about an employee who's injured as a result of another team member? These are just a bunch of questions that are being thrown out. So like if somebody comes in and hits this guy with a forklift, well, because he's injured and he got hit by the forklift, you're drug testing him. Like you can see where they're kind of going. It's like it doesn't really have. Why are you drug testing him? It doesn't make sense why you're drug testing him, and because he got hit by somebody else. I get it. I understand where they're going, but it still makes no sense as to why you can't have that control over your own business. And I think that's where the problem runs in. So, all right. What's reasonable? This is what they're looking at. What is OSHA's view of unreasonable procedures? We kind of gave a bunch of those examples. What they don't want to see is that mandated or blanket term. That's going to have to be written out of your programs. If any of those words exist, you're going to get cited for it. It's just the way that it is. So you have to start using terminology like this, where you have a reasonable procedure under your drug screening policy. They'll be focusing on the motivation as to why you're doing post-accident drug testing. What is your motivation? Again, do I need a motivation? I don't know. They're working for me. I don't understand why I need to know that, but what I don't know why you need to know what my motivation is to understand that they're drug testing. This will not affect random drug testing. They said that this does not affect that. If you have a random drug testing policy, they said that it will not affect that, and you should be able to continue to go on doing what you're doing as long as they look back and it doesn't seem as though somebody's being targeted or any of that kind of stuff. All right. Some questions as we kind of await more information that I want to kind of throw out there. How do DOT mandates affect this rule? So far, they've said that if you're under a DOT program, then you can fall under those DOT regulations. So if you do have terminology and things like that that are related to the DOT policies, then that will be able to get kind of, I don't know if grandfathered in or whatever, if that's the word, but you will be able to move over and use those policies. Okay? Is it possible injured workers are becoming a protected class? Seems that way to me. I didn't even know that they have this whole nother division now that does nothing but handles whistleblower cases. So I got this, I call one of our clients, is like, hey, we had this guy who was using drugs, and, we fired him, and now he called OSHA. Typical thing, and OSHA doesn't know, so they get those things all the time. They've got to take it kind of hey, let's come in as a mediator and really let's understand what's going on here before all the facts come out. And so they come in, and they now have, I called the office, and I said, we were setting up an appointment for this, and they said, oh, actually, we don't handle that anymore. We have a whole separate division that does that. What? I mean, I didn't know anything about it. Well, they have this whole different whistleblower division that now when you call them, and they are the mediators for these cases. So what they do is basically you get on the phone, or you go up to Kansas City with this mediator. You have the employee who's making the complaint, and if they have an attorney or whatever, they can sit there and make their case. And then you have the employer who's got their case. And so they sit there and they talk both sides, and they try to get to a place of common ground and say, really, what are the facts? I'm not against it. I think it's okay. But it's just crazy that they're now, there's obviously they see that there's a huge problem with whistleblowing, that they feel employees are getting fired or whatever because they're actually calling people out on their safety programs. I don't know. I don't feel like we work with a lot of clients. We work with 300 some clients. I don't feel like we work with a lot of those, any of those people. I guess it's possible we're not there all the time. We don't feel what some of those people feel. Maybe it's a superintendent that's out on the shop floor that's kind of leading that, not necessarily the owner of the company. But either way, they're responsible for that person doing that. Again, what are your post-accident motivations for drug screening? You got to assess that. How will employee complaints trigger OSHA enforcement? Do you think they're going to come in and see? To me, this opens up a whole nother can of worms, because now if somebody complains, all they have to do is come in and see what your written policy is. If it has the words mandatory or blanket in there, you're going to that's an easy way for them to get a citation, to walk away with a citation without even really doing anything, whether or not you even did anything. So I talked about the separate division that's already doing that. And then, so currently, real quick, what are some of your post-accident investigation procedures? Do you guys actually investigate the accident fully? And I don't even mean drug-wise. I'm just talking about, like, what is your policy? Do you guys have policies like that? Yeah, you do a complete test, and you probably go around and maybe even take pictures. Yeah, talk to the witnesses. All that kind of stuff to make sure you kind of assess the whole scene. You really go in, you put your investigator hat on, and you go in and you try to uncover all the details. One, so you understand what happened, but then two, so it doesn't happen again, right? If you guys aren't doing that, I really recommend that you have some sort of investigative policy, and now even more so than ever, because you're going to need to cover yourself if there is any reasonable suspicion, if there is any reason to believe that they're right on that line of like, well, they were kind of acting funny. I don't know. Now you're scared to drug test them because, yeah, they were walking around, they got hit by somebody, but that's because they were just out of it. They were out of it. Yeah, they didn't do anything, but they got hit by this forklift because he wasn't paying attention. He was still, half high or whatever. So, those are the kind of things you're going to really have to start digging into and make sure that you've got those things covered. How will this affect workers' comp payout? As far as coexisting with state work comp laws, because currently there's laws in place that give you guys discounts. They give you guys benefits for having a program like that in place. It's not easy. It's not easy to say we are 100% drug-free. Gosh, if you go to there's certain industries, and I probably shouldn't call them out, but there are certain industries that just seem to attract people who use drugs. And so for those employers to say, we don't use drugs here, man, they're potentially casting out a lot of what would be maybe good help, or even the opportunity to bring people in. Because if you have a zero-tolerance policy, you're excluding yourself. So it's not an easy decision to make. And so that's why I think, the states and the different insurance companies, whatever, will give you a benefit, because they understand that. They understand that it's not easy, and they understand that there's a lot that goes into that. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And real quick, I mean, I just want to, before we do questions and answer, and I don't know if Brian, if you want to come up and bring a mic, if anybody does have any questions, that'd be, what you did last time was great. We, it's very difficult when we talk about the politics of safety, because what I don't want you guys to leave with is just this doom and gloom, negative perception about even OSHA. With all the political stuff that goes on, it can really kind of rob you of the positives that come with a good safety program. Gosh, I feel like we live in a day and age where it is just, we just live in crazy times. I mean, it is some crazy stuff that's going on, and it just seems like there's this heaviness of negativity everywhere we go. And, you throw in all these things at work, and you throw in all this extra policy and all these procedures and all that stuff, and it just feels heavier. I mean, it's hard to be positive about stuff like this. What I'd really encourage you to try to focus on is not the negative, but understand what a good safety program does. If you're a company that really truly takes ownership of your safety program, you probably have employees that really appreciate you. They feel valued. They feel like they can come to it's kind of a safe place to come, and even if it's not safe, they feel like they have people that are backing them. And if you don't have that yet, or you don't feel like your culture's there, I would encourage you to get to a place and really strive to get to a place that's there. Because, look, we've got to find every positive thing we can that's out there right now. And I think if we can provide even something as simple as focusing on a good culture, a good safety program, I mean, all those things go together. And if you can do that, if you can show that you value somebody's life, if you can show them that you care about their quality of life through your safety program, I think you can see a lot of great benefit. So, that has nothing to do with us. That has nothing to do with me. That's just my encouragement to you as we deal with all this crap, with political crap and all that stuff. Don't focus on that. Focus on what you can do and what you can control. And then what you can do to come into your place of employment and just be a positive example for safety. Be somebody that backs it, that doesn't sit there and complain about all the OSHA stuff, that you just say, look, this is what we have to do, we're going to do it, and hopefully it's going to make us better. And we're going to be one of those companies that when they're publicly putting this stuff out there, we're going to be one of those companies that shows up, and we're going to be one that says we do it right. And it's going to be shown for everybody to see. So that's what I want to encourage you guys with. But questions? Is there any questions that you have?
Okay, so you have a driver, DOT, subjected driver, who also does shop work. If he's at the shop working on the truck, around the truck, I mean, I'm kind of confused where the lines cross over DOT obligations and then OSHA, where that stops.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think that every one of those is going to be assessed on an individual basis. What's the percentage of time that they're a driver? What were they doing? Were they doing something on the truck, or was he also spending 50% of his time working on equipment in the shop? You know what I mean? I think it kind of goes both ways. And we have places, where if they're a part of that DOT regulation, they're doing stuff with pallets. They're loading the trucks. They're doing a lot of stuff in the warehouse. So I would say, I mean, this is just a gut reaction. I would say that if they're doing those things, it's not going to fall under DOT. That's just a gut. If they're doing warehouse manufacturing type things or construction or whatever, I'm going to say it's going to be more on that side, and that's where they're going to look at it. Because what does that have to do with DOT? Even though they fall under that, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's a good question, but I think there'll be a lot of those things that start to uncover. And unfortunately, I think the only way that we're going to know this stuff is as companies get hit, and we see some actual case studies come out of various situations. So her question is, who do we write to complain to see that we don't want this to go through? Well, you get on the OSHA website, and they actually have a list of, they actually give time periods for when you can complain or when you can offer some other solution or something. Wouldn't hold your breath. they're for them to move forward with something like that, they're already pretty well. They've already done a bunch of case studies. They've already done a bunch of meetings, and what they feel has gotten them to a place where they feel like it's going to happen. The scary thing about the Department of Labor, and you'll feel this when you go in, and I feel this when I go in and argue cases for clients. There's no accountability for them. They're an entity that's out there that's really has no oversight. They can keep you in court as long as you want to pay for it, and it's kind of scary. So they know that, hey, this is a mid-sized employer. How much money are they willing to spend to try to fight this, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 citation, which is a big amount? Well, they may spend double that just in court because they can hold it up as long as they want. So that's the kind of scary stuff that even if they're right and they want to fight it out of principle, it doesn't feel very good. They're going to do what they're going to do. It does, and I think, as she said, if there's a big outpouring.
We have fought a lot of things on Wage and Labor Board with agriculture-related rules and laws that they pass down, and when there's just an outpour of comments during the comment period, they take a look at that. It's a political organization, and they don't want to be on the wrong side of the politics.
Yeah, I would say
it has to be a large movement. It can't just be 5 people.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, that's up to you guys. I mean, that's and the good thing is we live in a country where even though we deal with some of the politics, you have the freedom to be able to go do that, and that's a cool thing. What else? I know I'm already 2 minutes into some of your weekends, and I don't want to do that. I know it's the freaking weekend coming up, and I don't want to mess anybody's plans up. Yeah, one more.
On your slide, it said that they're curious about what is your post-accident motivations for drug screening.
Yes.
I would assume the motivation is always to find out if he was under the influence of drugs when the accident happened. What other motivation are they looking for?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the point. But I think, again, what they're coming from is they're looking at it, if a guy gets a bee sting, why are you saying he's under the influence? I mean, it doesn't to me either, because there's a certain way to lift. If you're kind of under the influence and you go in and you're being sloppy with your work and you have a back injury, I think it could absolutely apply, whether you're under the influence. So, but those are the specific examples. Those 3 actually, the bee sting, repetitive motion injuries, and back injury, were the 3 things that they actually called out and said that we feel like this is an unreasonable reason to go in and test. So yes, you are speaking logic, and we'll just leave it there. Anybody else? Maybe just a minute, maybe one more, if there is any. All right, thank you guys so much. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. I did put our contact information in there. Feel free to email. I will do whatever I can to point you guys in the right direction. All right?